You are listening to Show Up Arizona across the great and beautiful state of Arizona on iHeartRadio. My name is Billy Harfosh. We've been covering it. We've had several people in this studio on the show that's running for governor of Arizona, an essential position in our state. Of course, we've had Aaron Lieberman, friend of the show, Marco Lopez. As of late, Kari Lake. That's gotten a lot of buzz. By the way, YouTube has since pulled that video down. I'm still getting messages about the Kari Lake interview. YouTube has pulled it down. That's why you're not finding it. So you can go on my Facebook at Billy Harfosh, Show Up Arizona with Billy Harfosh, and find that. But a woman that I've been very intrigued by, and that I told you off the air, I've been hearing a lot of good things about, and has some really interesting ideas for the future of Arizona, is Miss Karrin Taylor Robson, and she is in studio right now. Miss Robson, welcome to the show. I'm glad we're sitting face to face, none of the Zoom stuff.
Right. Thank you, Billy. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's just dive right into it. Many would argue Republicans are losing the top of the ticket, especially here in Arizona. I would give you an example: Donald Trump, Martha McSally. What happened to the days of, the John McCains of the world, the Goldwater Republicans? Is that what you're trying to get back to here in Arizona?
Well, at the end of the day, I want to be the governor for all Arizonans. But I'm a lifelong Republican, lifelong conservative, and you mentioned Barry Goldwater, so I will venture into a story I don't always tell. But I got my start, actually, going door to door for Barry Goldwater in 1964. In utero. My mother was pregnant with me. She was a lifelong Democrat. She read The Conscience of a Conservative written by Barry Goldwater, became a Republican, and went door to door for him when he was running for president. So technically, I got my start in 1964 as a conservative Goldwater Republican.
Interesting. Now, fast forward a couple years there. You also worked for Ronald Reagan. I believe it was your first job out of college. Is that right? It
was. I ended up, I was at ASU and ended up as student body president at ASU, which in the grand scheme of things isn't that big of a deal, but it paved the way for my first job out of college, which was working for Ronald Reagan at the White House.
Well, here you are. It must have done something, right?
As a young woman out of college, it was a big deal, right? To go to work for Ronald Reagan, who, where is he now, right? We wish we had Ronald Reagan right now.
Yep.
But it was a huge opportunity as a young woman, and that paved the way for me to go work for two Republican governors. And all that happened before I went to law school. And since law school, I've been in the private sector now for almost 30 years.
So we're not gonna skate around this issue. While that is very interesting, I have to get back to this, because when I'm sitting in a bar with friends and we're talking politics and this political nerds, that's what we do. There's kind of this thing like, okay, would you agree, Ms. Robson, that Kari Lake and Matt Salmon are, quote, Trump-type MAGA Republicans? Can we agree on that?
Yes.
Yes, okay, we can agree on that. How would you categorize yourself?
Well, I categorize myself as a lifetime conservative. On every issue that matters to conservatives, I check the box.
Okay.
And it has always been that way.
Understood. Now, we've had Peter Navarro on the program. We've had, obviously, Kari Lake on the program. A lot of people in that sort of Trump world, I would say. And they use the term rhino, okay, when we're talking about Governor Doug Ducey. Would you categorize yourself as I like to call it just a normal, kind of a traditional type of Republican?
Yes, I would say I'm a traditional Republican.
Okay. What is the and this is where I'm going here, what is the difference? And this is what I can't always figure out. Other than tweets and rhetoric, what is the difference, and logos on a hat, what is the difference between a MAGA Trump Republican and a traditional Republican? Are there real policy
that's
differences?
A great question. I think it's more personality differences than policy differences. Because truth be known, we raised and wrote checks to Donald Trump, well over $1 million. My daughter worked for Donald Trump at the White House. She turned out the lights on January 20th. And I will defend his record, because his record of accomplishment, not in 4 years, but 3 years. The last year was consumed by COVID. He has an incredible record to look back on. And I believe that my policies and my how I would lead from a policy perspective is much more aligned with President Trump.
Isn't that interesting? I think that's interesting how we kind of categorize these different types of politicians in 2022 modern political America here. Really, you also want to finish the wall.
Right.
You want to surge National Guard troops to the border to get that under control. We're going to talk about all this. A lot of the same policies, but you kind of use the word like personalities are different. It's fascinating.
Very, very much. This is America, where we don't all agree all the time. And in fact, if we wanted to all agree all the time, I can give you a list of places to go, starting with China, North Korea, Venezuela. You can go to Cuba. It's only 45 miles from our coast. That's where everybody agrees with each other because they have to. This is America. This is a place where we use our words to figure out solutions to complex problems. And if we can't use our words, then all we're left with is stomping and throwing sledgehammers at TVs and fighting with each other.
Well, who
That's
threw
not
a
America.
Sledgehammer at a TV? Is that a thing?
Well,
Sorry, we won't get into that yet. All right, because I don't want to get sidetracked here. I want to be respectful of your time, and there's important things that we got to talk about, issues for the people of Arizona. I have to ask you this. There's one difference. There is a difference, and I would go to elections, election fraud, election integrity, freedom of elections. I'm going to ask you a question that I asked of Donald Trump Jr. weeks before the last presidential election. I recently, a week ago, asked Kari Lake the same question. If you wind up being our Republican nominee in the state of Arizona as governor, okay, and you go, let's just say, sake of argument, up against Katie Hobbs, and you lose the election night, you lose the election to Katie Hobbs, are you willing, under current Arizona rules, regulations, Arizona election law, to accept defeat? And I think that's a fair question to answer, to ask all people running for office in Arizona right now, because we saw what happened last time.
So you're asking if on election night or when the votes are counted, Katie Hobbs wins.
Katie Hobbs wins.
Based on the results of the election.
Correct.
Absent evidence of fraud, overwhelming fraud, absolutely.
Okay. I think that's a fair question. And we asked the same question to Kari Lake, and she said, well, it depends on X, Y, Z, and it depends on a lot of different factors and where the elections run. So I think it's fair because as a voter, I want to know that who I'm voting for, that number one, my vote counts, and that number two, at the end of this process, at the end of this democracy as voters, we can move on. And that's not even happening right now. When you hear Kari Lake say that she would decertify, she would move to decertify the last presidential election, how do you feel about that whole term decertify? Well,
as a lawyer, or a recovering lawyer as I am, the first question I would ask is, what does that look like? There, to my knowledge, is no process for decertification of an election that occurred a couple of years ago. So I don't know what that process is.
So you're not going there with the past audits and all this kind of thing. You're looking to the future. You're looking to move forward.
That's correct. We have what we call elections every 2 years, and they're battles, right? They are battles. Our enemies want us to be battling about the past, and I am focused on the future battle. We have a future battle upon us in November of this year. And I know I chaired the Republican Legislative Victory Fund in 2020 at the request of our Senate President and the Speaker of the House to maintain our Republican majorities. And notwithstanding the fact we were outspent 3-1 and in one case 4-1, and against all odds and all predictions, we maintained the Republican majorities. But I bring that up because I've seen firsthand what the left is willing to do in Arizona to turn our state completely. And so my focus is on maintaining the governor's office in Republican hands. And I'm focused forward in November of 2022 so that we can do that.
By the way, have anybody from Governor Ducey's office or the governor himself reached out to you at all in support of your campaign?
Not. You'd have to ask him who he's supporting or what he's planning to do.
Well, I'm just curious because we talk about, the other candidates that are running in the Republican Party. You would think that part of a legacy of a politician, of a state governor, would be to pass it down to someone he thinks is going to do a great job. And I don't necessarily think he's going to put his name behind Matt Salmon or Kari Lake. So you're the next logical choice.
My sense is he's going to want to have the candidate who is best positioned to win in November.
Sure. Makes sense. Let's stop talking about other candidates. I want to talk about you right now. Karrin Taylor Robson. She's in studio, iHeartRadio, Show Up Arizona with Billy Harfosh. Let's get to the border. A lot of things are happening at the border, and I think with what's happening in another border across the world, we've kind of forgotten a little bit about what's happening here at the border in Arizona. I'm going to quote you. When I am governor, we'll surge National Guard to the border and finish the wall. We've seen the ads. We've seen it on your Instagram. We've seen it everywhere. So what does that mean, surge the National Guard to the border in practice? Is that not just a kind of a sexy talking point?
No. We have sent National Guard troops. We can send more National Guard troops to the border to support our local law enforcement officials. I do have a 6-point plan on my website, and I talk, number one, surge National Guard. Number two, I say the first thing I will do after I become governor is to call an emergency session of our legislature, because we've got to find the resources to send down to our local law enforcement so that they can enforce the law. We're going to construct the wall where we can. We're going to also utilize surveillance technology, because most people think of a wall as just a vertical structure, and it's actually a system that includes fiber optics and sensor technology and drones and cameras and all of those things. So we will use that technology. My plan also calls for revoking funding from any city that declares themselves to be a sanctuary city. And I also believe that we need to, and I will, lead the charge to enter into a multi-state compact with other governors, because this is a 50-state border crisis. Arizona just happens to be on the front lines. We take a disproportionate share of the cost of this. It was estimated before the surge really started happening last year, it was estimated that it's costing Arizona $2 billion a year. The cost of this flood of illegal immigrants into the state, into and across the state of Arizona. Just think of what we can do with $2 billion.
Sure.
I mean, just one slice of that. Criminal aliens in our prisons. We have 2,400 in our prisons today at a cost of $78 million. And I think about how many police officers could we hire for $78 million? Or how many teachers could we hire for $78 million? It's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
And Arizona's on the front lines, and I mean that with all sincerity. We have a drug crisis that we've had, for a long time, but it's been exacerbated by what's going on at the border. We lost 100,000 Americans last year to fentanyl. 100,000. The precursor ingredients for fentanyl is coming from China to the cartels to a neighborhood near you. And rarely does a day or a week go by that I'm not hearing another story from a mother or a classmate or a friend of somebody who's died from fentanyl. I just heard today a story of somebody who was filling up their gas tank, and there was enough fentanyl residue on the gas pump that they had to have, the police came with Narcan to resuscitate the person. So it is impacting everybody across this country, but we're on the front lines, and it costs us a lot.
It seems like a lot of people talk about the border, especially states like Arizona and Texas and California, and then there's talk, even on the federal level, and then not that much changes. We saw a big change from the Trump administration to the Biden administration. Can you educate myself, educate my audience? I know we saw surges in fentanyl after Biden came into office, but in real terms, let's just take off our political hats for a moment. What has actually changed at the border? Because it's my understanding, like the Stay in Mexico policy and different policies, Biden has actually kept some of that from Donald Trump. What has actually changed? You were down there, right? Okay. You were filming ads, but I assume you were down there talking to people. Mm-hmm. What has really changed at the border? Why is it worse?
Well, the message, even before Biden took office, the message was broadcast to the world that you can come to America and you could get in. I was down there. I've been down there multiple times.
Do you believe that, though?
Yes, I absolutely believe that. I absolutely believe that. And I'll tell you, I've been censored by Fox Sports. Now, finally, they caved and let my ads air. But they took my ads down because they thought I was using actors in my commercial. And I tell you, it was, we obviously, they put the ads back up. My campaign manager took the photos of a tourist bus dropping off illegal aliens across the border, across the river from where we were standing. 25 of them came scurrying out of the tourist bus across the Morales Dam, where it has about an inch of water, and they come up the other side, right into the waiting arms of the Border Patrol, who are standing there at tables with their paperwork to fill out. And I bring that up because the night before we witnessed this, The sheriff in Yuma County told me about the marketing efforts that are underway in countries across the globe by the cartels. In some cases, they're going door to door in these countries saying, come to America, we'll get you a job. They then buy round-trip tickets, airplane tickets into gateway cities like Cancun or Mexico City on tourist visas. They get them into the country, and then they move them to airports closer to the border, put them on the tourist buses, and deliver them to our front door. When he was telling me that the night before we witnessed this, I thought it was a little outlandish and crazy. The next morning, I'm back at the border for a TV interview when this all unfolded right before our very eyes. And so it sounds crazy, but it's happening. And we witness the results of what the cartels are doing. And it's hard to take politics out of this because I lay the blame squarely at the feet of Washington, D.C. For 40 years, Congress has failed to provide us with a functioning immigration system. We have got to have a functioning immigration system. We have to have a legal way for people to enter this country, and we don't. Just real quick,
how much power does the governor of Arizona have in regards to the border as opposed to the federal government? In other words, if you say you're the next governor of Arizona, you say, you know what, we're going to finish the darn wall. I'm surging National Guard troops to the border. Do you have that authority? Immigration law is squarely in the purview of the federal government, and they have failed. They have failed. So it's left to governors to do whatever they can. You see governor in Texas building the wall, right? They appropriated $3 billion to build their own wall, and they have something in Texas called oil, which gives them a lot of resources and a lot of flexibility. In Arizona, we've got some private land, we have state land, we have federal land, and we have tribal land on our border. So where we can build the wall, we can, on state land and on private land where you have private landowners who are willing. There's also all this surplus fencing that was built or was paid for by the American taxpayers. In fact, one of our trips down there, we were in Cochise County, and we're driving along the Obama-Biden wall, which there's miles and miles of the Obama-Biden wall that nobody likes to talk about for some reason. But adjacent to that wall, on the other side of the roadway that we're on, was probably a quarter mile to a half a mile of Trump wall, laying flat, not yet erected. And it was, stacked 10, 12 feet tall for a quarter of a mile. And the sheriff deputy that was touring us around told us that the Border Patrol was told to figure out what to do with all this extra fencing that has not yet been put up, but we've paid for. And apparently they looked at all sorts of options, one of which was to dig a hole and bury it. That's how much this administration hates Donald Trump. I mean, to even have that as an option was quite eye-opening. Speaking right now to Karrin Taylor Robson. She's running for governor of the state of Arizona. Okay, let's get to stuff that's really pissing people off. I'll be honest with you, across the state. Inflation, the cost of living in Arizona. You go fill up your darn gas tank. It's getting out of control. I'm going to drop some facts here. I'm going to drop some numbers, and I want to get your reaction. At 206%, I can't even believe these numbers are true, but they are. At 206%, Phoenix is one of 13 U.S. cities with home value increases of more than 200% since 2000. Overall home prices in the United States have increased 1,608% since 1970, while inflation has increased 644%. What does that mean? For example, $20,000 in assorted goods in 1970 would cost you $148,000 today. But a $20,000 house in 1970 would cost you $342,000 today. And also, by the way, AAA reports today the average price for a gallon of regular unleaded gas in Arizona is $4.69. I don't know where they're getting their gas. Where I live, it's like $4.99. Okay, the point of all of this is inflation is going crazy, and even before the inflation went crazy, the cost of living, rent, and real estate. For a young person, for a family of four, it's almost impossible to buy a house in the valley right now, and I understand in other parts of Arizona as well, on just a normal wage. Mm-hmm. What do we do to get these costs under control?
Well, there's a whole bunch rolled up in the question that you've presented. Inflation, was well underway well before, the current Ukraine war and the exposure of Europe's dependency on oil, which has a ripple effect on us. When you're printing money like the Federal Reserve does and spending it like Congress does, inflation is sure to follow, and we're seeing that. So you have that going on at the national level. And then you have the complete exodus of states like California and Washington and Oregon, people fleeing high tax, high regulatory states, predominantly blue states, coming to red states. So Arizona is, officially the home of the California refugee and others that want to come to a place that still has a welcoming environment.
Are you cool with that, by the way? I don't mean to interrupt you. Are you cool with people from California coming in?
So long as they leave their politics behind.
Fair enough.
Absolutely. But so we have, you have inflation, you have this demand, this surging demand. Arizona is one of the highest states for new, growth, people moving here. And then you've got supply chain issues. You have labor shortages. So all these things are conspiring together to spike housing costs. It's a supply and demand issue. Right? If you can, you might be able to sell 400 houses a month or a year or whatever it is. But if you can't build them because you don't have workers or you don't have the supplies, it just creates a scarcity of things. Last I checked, we had about 2 weeks supply of resale homes on our market. So the supply of houses to buy is so tight that's just going to raise prices.
That's right. And so just on the housing issue, just for one moment, because I hear from listeners all the time that are really pissed off about this issue, including myself. You can hear it in my voice. Just on that issue alone, you're talking about supply and demand. The market is the market is the market. This is capitalism. This has no interface with the state government. Like, we can't go pointing fingers about the real estate market. Am I right or wrong there?
Again, it's a very complex issue, right? It's supply and demand, but then you look, okay, is there more land available to build on? Well, okay. The state land trust owns 9.2 million acres of land. Do you free up any more of that? Well, you can, but you have other issues then you have to tackle. Infrastructure, water. So there's no simple answer, but what we're experiencing today is people choosing with their feet to move to a free state. Arizona is the proverbial shining city on a hill that Ronald Reagan used to talk about, America in terms of. People want to be free. They want to come to a place where they work hard, treat people well, they can accomplish anything. That's Arizona. We have to keep it that way. But in the meantime, we've got some real struggles, including the cost of living. And as you mentioned earlier, it's not just houses; it's the cost of gas, the cost of milk, it's everything. And I lay the blame of that at the feet of Washington D.C. again, who they spend like drunken sailors. They spend other people's money as if it's their own, and it's not their own. Not only is it not their own, it's our children's and our grandchildren's money who are going to be paying for their spending spree for a long, long time. Speaking
of Karrin Taylor Robson, we've got a couple minutes left, but we got a number of issues to tie up here. Okay. Russia-Ukraine war, very quickly. I don't want to have this whole interview with a potential next governor of Arizona without at least getting your comments here. When you come into office, if you come into office as our next governor, you could be in a whole different world than we're living in right now. Okay, geopolitically speaking, internationally speaking. Borders could change. Militaries could be fighting that aren't fighting right now. That's scary stuff. I'm not going to get into an international politics conversation with you, but it could be different. From a daily basis, from a weekly basis, as governor of an American state, does that affect you at all?
It affects all of us. It affects all of us. You can go back over the course of the last 300 years of history, and most wars are fought over energy. So think about that. Think about where we are today with energy. Over the last, in particular during the Biden administration, we cut off the Keystone Pipeline. We were for the first time in decades, we were energy independent. And now we're dependent on our adversaries to provide us with energy. It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. And meanwhile, we allow, Putin and Europe to become dependent on Putin for energy. So you can go back and you can chronicle wars over the last 300 years. And like I said, most of them are won and fought over energy. This is no different. And it's not like he woke up one day and decided to go into Ukraine. Putin sensed an opportunity, and he knew he had a continent dependent on him. And so he was able to take advantage of that. Now, I think with every passing day, we're actually he's exposing his inadequacies from a military perspective, and so that's good for all of us. But we are not insulated from what goes on around the world. And I'll go right back to the fentanyl coming from China. It's coming through our front door, and we have as Americans have had the luxury for a long time of fighting with ourselves. And I just suggest that everybody realize that we have real enemies out there, and it's not us.
Do you think Arizona should be welcoming open arms, accepting refugees from Ukraine?
I think so long as we have an immigration system and a system that allows people to come here and be productive, we should allow anybody willing to be productive into our communities.
Okay.
But legally.
Okay. That's fine. Karrin Taylor Robson, okay. I'm going to ask you this in a very sensitive, delicate way, but I'm going to preface this by saying, at the end of the day, you are running to become the executive, the CEO, the leader, the governor of a essential, very important state in America because of elections, because of business, because of freedom, because of a lot of things. Arizona is a hot state right now, and I'm not talking about the weather. You are running for that office. You have put yourself out there. There is another woman that is running against you. And before you can go on to the next step, you have got to beat her, okay? Mm-hmm. Do you mind if I bring up some of the attacks and just let you briefly, for my audience, respond to those attacks?
Sure.
Because, again, going back to that scenario with my buddies, guy friends, girlfriends at the bar, everyone's talking about Kari Lake, and oh my gosh, who's this woman, Karrin Taylor Robson? Maybe the Kari Lake campaign is getting a little bit worried, okay? So I just want you to respond, and by the way, these are not my words, these are Kari Lake's words. Let's start with this. She said, guess who said it? She put out this tweet. Guess who said it? We, America, have a history that none of us are all that proud of. And she said, who said it, right? Twitter poll. Socialist AOC, my Democratic opponent, Katie Hobbs, or my primary Republican opponent, Karrin for Arizona, which would be you. When you see a tweet like that, do you just get upset about it? Do you feel like you got to get on camera and have like a rebuttal? How do you answer to something like that?
Well, I'll tell you, my North Star is the truth, right? And I tell everybody that as this primary battle wages on, they should always be in search of the truth. When I saw that tweet, she completely took it out of context, because what I was talking about is a book by Eric Metaxas called If You Can Keep It, which talks about American exceptionalism. And I was talking about the greatness of America. And we all have parts of history that we're not proud of. In fact, I'd even suggest today, in the cancel culture and woke environment that we're living in, we're going to look back on this and not be very proud of it. Like we're not very proud of, slavery. But it was completely taken out of context. So to me, it evidenced her ability as a purveyor of fake news for 27 years to twist and turn something that's simply not true.
Well, and if you're looking at it in absolutes, I mean, I'm a red-blooded American. I love this country more as much as the next guy. But let's be honest. There are certain things, I'm not speaking for you, Ms. Robson, for myself, certain things that I'm not proud of. Like you said, slavery. I mean, are you kidding me? Of course. There's certain things in my life that I've done that I'm not proud of. So, okay. The next one, and it gets a little bit deeper here. This is from Kari Lake. I think it's disgusting that an open borders Ducey clone rhino is trying to buy the election with her 95-year-old husband's millions. And the people of Arizona deserve to know about it. Now, I think a lot of this is coming from, as somebody that interviews all these politicians, she wouldn't be talking about you unless she was getting a little bit concerned.
Right.
Okay? When you see that kind of attack, and obviously an attack politically, but more so on your family and your financial situation, which is no secret, how do you respond to that? Because a lot of people, when they see like that word, that M word, millions, they, elitist, you got to be careful, I'm sure, your campaign to make sure you express this in the right way. Yes, we're raising money, and yes, we have money, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's just not. She's not accurate, right? Open borders. I'm like, really, right? I am not open borders. Never have been. Never will be. Would she call me a Ducey clone?
Well, yeah. And the following tweet said, "It doesn't matter how much of her husband's money she spends. Arizona does not want another open borders globalist rhino. Sorry, Karrin."
Okay. Well, I don't want to skip over the Ducey thing, because what she might not remember, because she was a Democrat at the time, when Ducey first ran for governor, I recruited his opponent. I supported his opponent financially and otherwise. His opponent lost, and Governor Ducey, after the person that I supported lost, called me and said, you told me you were going to recruit him, you were loyal to him, and now I need your help. And that's the way it should be as Republicans. That's the way it should be. Then, she, in one fell swoop, offended single moms, successful women, and senior citizens in one fell swoop. She doesn't have my husband's age correct, so you'd think she would fact check herself as a former journalist. But I had a successful career for 28 years. And for 12 years, I was a single mom of 4 kids, running my law firm and working. I worked 20 hours a day for many, many years, and I was successful on my own. And so she took a swipe at successful women. She took a swipe at single moms. And so I find it offensive. But again, I go back to, how she is willing to twist the truth, which is something that over 27 years in the media, apparently she got pretty good at.
And Karrin, you're speaking of the state of Arizona now. We have 2 minutes left. What's interesting to me is I go back to the beginning of our conversation. Mm-hmm. It's like a lot of the things you talked about today are not so different from your opponent's policies. You talked about finishing the wall. You talked about securing the border. You talked about fentanyl. Mm-hmm. You talked about inflation and getting that under control. Similar talking points, but it comes down to personalities. But you have to understand, and maybe it frustrates you, that in this day and age, in this quick hitters, in this social media world, this stuff, this is what plays. This is what gets clicks and likes. Sledgehammers to the TV, sledgehammers to the media, the fake news. That, journalists should be held accountable. Journalists should be punished. This is what people like. This is what people want to hear. We'll finish up with this. You are going to be probably going up against Kari Lake. I'm just going to say it. And she is a well-known woman. I'm in the media business. She's a famous woman. If she walks into a restaurant tonight, people are, love her or hate her, people are going to come up to her and want to get a picture and want to hang out and want to get a whatever. That's something you have to overcome. Of course, you're recognizable. Of course, you're known. I'm seeing you on our televisions. I'm seeing you all over the place. But you don't have 27, 30 years on our televisions every day. It's a little bit of a difference. How do you overcome that? Name recognition.
It's name recognition. I worked extremely hard from the time I launched my campaign in September of last year to the end of December. I went around the state, meeting people, building my grassroots. I had a couple goals. One, I wanted to raise more money than anybody from more donors than anybody, and I did. One of my opponents was out touting that she was going to have, more donors than anybody and break all sorts of records. She had 9,000 donors. I had 16,000 donors. I raised a lot more money, and I spent my money wisely. Because there is a time to spend it. You want to do it efficiently and effectively. And when you're the steward of someone else's money, you better spend it wisely. I had a 19% burn rate. My opponents, one of them had a 76% burn rate. One had a 50% burn rate. So I will be wise with my money, the money that I raise and the money that I put into this campaign. And I think that in and of itself is evidence enough for people to look and see how I will be a steward of other people's money. I'm not going to waste it. But it takes money to build name ID when you're up against somebody. Number one, there was a career politician in the race who has name ID. And then my other opponent that spent 27 years living in people's living rooms. She automatically has an advantage with name ID. And we will overcome that.
Real quick before I let you go, Karrin Taylor Robson, I covered Governor Ducey, especially during the pandemic, and was at all of his press conferences. And I saw the Republican Party, a lot of people in the Republican Party turn on him. And then the Democrats and the left, they already had turned on him, but they were upset because he wasn't doing enough about the pandemic, and the right, the far right, the Trump right, was upset because he was doing too much, and Arizona's not free anymore. It's just like he couldn't win. He couldn't win at all. When you see that, if you're our governor, you got to govern to Republicans, to Trump Republicans, to Democrats, and this other little thing out there that's quite big in Arizona, as you know, independents.
Yes.
It's difficult right now. Do you have have you just accepted that like X amount percentage of the population, if I'm the next governor of Arizona, is not going to like me?
That's correct. But I will be the governor for all Arizonans. And if you look at my history and my record of accomplishment, I have led teams, I have accomplished goals, I have brought people together from all different persuasions to accomplish things and to solve complex problems. This is not, you're not running to be the governor of 30% or 40% of the state. You're running for governor to be governor for 100% of the state. And that means you're going to have people from across the spectrum that you're going to have to work with whether you want to or not. But oftentimes you need them to solve complex problems.
There she is, Karrin Taylor Robson, speaking to the state of Arizona from Tucson to Phoenix and everywhere in between. My name is Billy Harfosh. There's a camera right there. I put my iPhone up there because we do not want anybody accusing us of editing interviews, of fake news, or any of that. So whatever you hear, you got it here. I don't have any fancy editing software. She's here in the flesh. We didn't change her words. There's no actors here that I can see. So that's the interview. And by the way, a lot of people, I'll tell you to your face right now, a lot of people in the political circles, business circles, they think that you are our next logical choice for the governor of Arizona. So we'll see what happens. I welcome you on the show anytime.
Thank you.
There she is, Karrin Taylor Robson. Show Up Arizona with Billy Harfosh. We'll be right back.